That departed Earth in 2006. It was quite a long journey, and now we see it going through Pluto or through Jupiter, where it ended its journey of 2007 journey with a gravitational assist from this planet, and then after a little bit of time by Jupiter, studying Jupiter, its atmosphere, and what it has to offer, it went into hibernation mode for just a little bit, as it didn't pass any planets for quite a long while. This is as it ticked through 2007, 2008, all the way up to 2015, which is where we are right now, studying the distant dwarf planet Pluto and what it has to offer in all of its glory. This is our close approach to Pluto via New Horizons, and this is what we're covering tonight. Looking forward to this, the culmination of this journey that's going to happen tomorrow at 7:49 Eastern, 11:49 UTC. So stay tuned for that show as well. But yes, this is the first part in a three-part series where we're going to be talking tonight about all the different imagery that has been coming out of this mission over the past few months. It's been incredible to see what's developed with Pluto. And then on the second day here, we're going to look on the 14th on the actual close approach of New Horizons to Pluto. It's going to be going so close, just 7,800 miles away. It's going to be incredible to see what sort of imagery comes out on that. And we're going to be going in for a third show on July 15th to show just what imagery is coming out. It's going to take a little while for those final images to be coming back to Earth from New Horizons. And so we're going to be going live in the evening of July 15th to go over just what those images happen to be for the close approach. But for now, let's take a look at all that's been going on with Pluto. And accompanying me here tonight is SLU astronomer Will Gator, and we're going to be looking at, here are some actual live images coming out of the Canary Islands, of the SLU scopes from the Canary Islands of Pluto. You see it as that red dot near the center of the screen right there. And it's actually, these are scopes that we love to use all the time. They're 8,000 feet above sea level. In summer, when this is the season right here, we have about 95% of the nights are clear. So we're very happy to bring this clear image of Pluto itself to you from the ground as New Horizons approaches itself. But geez, isn't that a crowded star field, huh, Will? Oh, hold on for 1 second. I'm sorry. We aren't hearing your audio, I don't believe.
Can you
Oh,
hear me
here it
now?
is coming in right now. Yeah.
Brilliant. What I was saying is that this is how the story started, with a view like this, with an image like this. If we go back to 1930 with Clyde Tombaugh and his work at the observatory, basically looking against dense star fields like this one, looking for that little tiny dot of light moving against the background star field. And he made that discovery. He saw that point of light all those years ago, and now here we are. Tomorrow is the day that humanity actually gets its spacecraft to take those close-up images. It's remarkable. This is a real moment to savor in history.
It really is. And I'm so happy we could start here on the ground just because right here, how it looks, it's so uh, you can't really tell much of a difference between it and other stars in the background. It actually looks a bit smaller than some of the other things that we're seeing. And so now, as we're getting closer and closer to this distant object in our solar system, we're seeing it come into flush, full view, and
Yeah.
the features that we're seeing are absolutely incredible. It's so exciting to be bringing to you images tonight that are coming from NASA, our one of our lovely sleuth partners. Just last year, we signed a Space Act agreement with NASA, working to protect the universe through monitoring asteroids with the amateur astronomers of the world. And so it's great to be working with them again in this juncture to see what these images are coming out from New Horizons. And so, really, without further ado, I think this is a great time to start venturing toward Pluto through the scope of New Horizons, seeing what imagery has been coming out over the past 3 months, because there sure has been a lot of it. This is, yeah, the first image of Pluto and Charon. It's one of the Pluto's moons that we know of. And really, so as we're starting to see this coming into view, coming into color, uh, what sort of excitement maybe were you feeling around that time? When you were first starting to see these images, Will, was there any sort of excitement building for you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have to go back to really the Hubble Space Telescope pictures, which were our best view of Pluto up to this point. And really they were, although beautiful and hugely accomplished in terms of a technical point of view, what Hubble can do, it really was just this little pixelated blob, a little pixelated circle where we could see slight differences in light and dark features. But here is this first color picture that we had of this Pluto Charon system, and there, in a sense, you almost got a teaser of what was to come, and it's this view that's just we've slowly crept towards it. It's suddenly become this sort of amazing world, this speck of light. I just think it's wonderful, and that journey has been both literal and sort of figurative in a way, hasn't it? From that dot of light, which you said earlier, it just looks like a dot of light. It's absolutely right, and I think that speaks to the immense distance of what we're talking about here. Pluto is nearly 5 billion kilometers away. It's absolutely vast distance to travel. So yeah, this was really the beginning of New Horizons' great adventure.
Absolutely, and yeah, I mean, you're so right on the point that it's starting to give us this conception of just the scale of our solar system within this gigantic galaxy, within this gigantic universe. In that this full first color image was taken when New Horizons was 71 million miles away from Pluto, and so we are only getting closer and closer. The actual close approach being 7,800 miles away, and so we're talking in billions and millions and thousands. We're getting so much closer at each point in time, and so it's really been spectacular to see what has developed. But yeah, here are some of the features that we started to see coming to light. Like I believe one of them is called the whale at the bottom of the bottom of Pluto. There's lots of little different things to investigate. Do you have a particular favorite feature that you've seen that's come out of all these imagery?
Oh, there's so many intriguing pictures. I mean, there's hints later, and I'm sure we're going to go on to see them of of impact craters and these strange sort of polygon shapes across. I really want to know what they are. I mean, you can't really make straight edges and all those sort of things in planetary science. So that's going to be interesting to see once we get closer images, or if there are any on the other side. What is going on in that terrain? Because, like you say, if there's one thing that you can guarantee is that astronomers have wonderful imaginations and they come up with all sorts of interesting and sort of original names for these shapes. So yeah, the whale. I can't wait to see what we're going to see. Different animals, that sort of thing.
And it speaks back to even our earliest days with astronomy, where we're looking up at the night sky and seeing shapes in the constellations of the stars. Now we're looking at a distant dwarf planet and seeing similar features that we're trying to relate to our own experiences in order to really navigate a map across this
Mm.
distant dwarf planet. And so we see the live imagery in the background, which really just serves as a stark contrast. That there's just this distant dot in the center of the image, and here we see Pluto and Charon in color even closer than we saw them last time. I believe this was when New Horizons was 3.7 million miles away. So just getting closer and closer. And so now, instead of just seeing those two dots, you actually see features, with, of course, being Pluto being on the right and Charon being on the left. And there's a lot to see here. Do you have any thoughts on why Pluto might have the color that it does, Will?
Some of the things that dominate the color are these interesting chemicals called tholins, and they're thought to be sort of almost like hydrocarbons. You get things like nitrogen and methane breaking down by sunlight in the atmosphere and then sort of falling onto the surface, and this can give a sort of ruddy, dark, brownish, ruddy color to the surface. And it's thought that that's probably what's happening on Pluto and perhaps quite a few other of these distant Kuiper Belt objects. So that's possibly what's causing this sort of red coloration here. But you were saying earlier about how we sort of attach these shapes, and it's a very sort of fundamental thing. And I think that's absolutely right. This is this beautiful contrast between our live images from the Canary Islands and this image from New Horizons. And I think that's what's beautiful about planetary science, and a moment like the one that we're experiencing now and over the next coming days is here we're seeing something familiar. We're seeing a world where there are structures on Charon. There appear to be chasms, great valleys at the moment, and who knows, these are images that we're going to get tomorrow of this close approach of the surface of Pluto. Maybe we'll see features that we recognize from hills and mountains and things like that. And I think that is the beauty of planetary science and exploring our solar system, is we really go out to these points of light, and then we see something that in some ways is holding up a mirror to familiar features that we know on Earth. That to me is very exciting.
And you've been sort of teasing a little bit the potential of impact craters and things like that. And so if you look at the bottom right portion of this image of Charon, you're going to see something that maybe looks a little bit similar in your mind to what you might see on the moon. You see a little bit of
Mm.
a hole-like object with streams of white sort of going away from that hole. And so is that the supposed impact crater that we're investigating there?
Yeah, I think this is a very strong candidate from an impact crater from everything I've seen and read from the NASA scientists. I mean, like, you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. It reminds you of those classic impact craters on the moon that you see, Tycho, for example, that beautiful bright ray ejector system. That's what we call these streaks of bright material out over the surface. Now, on the moon, of course, you're hitting into basaltic rock, lava plains, things like that. But here on Charon, what we're probably seeing is ice. Perhaps ammonia-rich ices, things like that, mixing around and creating this bright, fresh material. Because ice is incredibly reflective, and so that's probably what we're seeing here. We're probably not seeing solid rock like we do on the moon.
And we're also there's this interesting sort of darkish region on the northern pole of the moon there. Do we have any ideas of what that could be?
Not as far as I'm aware. I've read some sort of speculations that perhaps Pluto might be involved in this sort of dark material. I haven't, heard any more from those sort of early speculations, and I think that's kind of what's sort of exciting and frustrating at the same time about these last few days. Is that as each new image comes in, people go, "Hang on, where?" And it's sort of you're constantly trying to adapt and trying to sort of react to all these new pictures and think, oh, that's weird. But I was saying earlier about chasms that on Charon here, you can see on the right edge, the right limb there, the feature that the NASA scientists believe is a candidate, or at least right across there. You see it on the right hand side. It's sort of in shadow, a potential chasm, a huge, canyon. And so that sort of information, seeing those sort of surface features, they're not just interesting in their own right. That will tell us about things like interior geology, the strength of the crust of the moon, and things like that. So, all these beautiful pictures are also telling us a real story as well.
And oh yes, and here's a gorgeous one of the features on Pluto as well. We have a lot of things going on here. Like again, I just have to point out the whale at the bottom, and you were talking about chasms, and here we have a little annotation of possible cliffs as well.
Mm.
Are there any features that really pop out to you is that you'd like to see more of as Pluto flies by? Any mysteries that you'd like to see solved? I know there's a lot to choose from.
There's so much, but I tell you one thing that is sort of been a thing that scientists have been talking about a long time is the similarities between Pluto and Neptune's largest moon, Triton. And actually, I'm not a planetary scientist, but when I look at these pictures superficially on the outside, it does look very, very similar. So you see this sort of equatorial, sort of ruffled region there. Now, I don't know, maybe we're going to see, as we get closer, we might see even more interesting features there. Triton, we know from pictures from the Voyager spacecraft, it has things like geysers. So geysers erupting with nitrogen sort of sublimation and dust as well, creating these beautiful sort of streaks on the surface. So I would be hugely excited to see this sort of active cryo geology going on Pluto, because that's the sort of processes we can potentially see on Pluto. We're not going to see things like lava volcanoes, but ices and things like that. So I'm really excited not just to see this new landscape and potential for things like mountains and valleys and impact craters. I'd love to see a hint and a little piece of evidence that Pluto is not just this little sort of sedentary world out in the edge of the solar system that doesn't do anything. I want to see it with little geysers and just to think that there is this point of light is this active world with interesting sort of cryogeology going on. I'm really looking forward to more of these pictures.
There's so much to learn, and because of that, the New Horizons is just chock full of imaging instruments. People think of the imagery coming in from New Horizons, but that's just only sort of one part of the whole puzzle. And this might be a good time to go over in a little bit of detail just what is involved with this spacecraft. Two of the main real big participants in terms of the imagery that we're seeing coming out of NASA are coming from what's called LORRI, the Long Range Reconnaissance Imager, which is the main telescopic camera. And then we're also seeing things from Ralph, which this is what's adding the color to the imagery that you're seeing, because it's a spectrometer, and it's helping with color composition and thermal maps of the planet. But there's a lot of different stuff going on here. There's also an intriguing instrument called ALICE, and what exactly does that do?
So ALICE is what we call a spectrometer. So whereas LORRI, like you said, they're telescopes and cameras. LORRI, I think, is a 20-centimeter telescope with a camera at the back of it, and Ralph, similar, it's a camera system that has a very sensitive camera. What ALICE does is it basically collects the light that it's seeing through its optics and then spreads it apart into a rainbow of colors, essentially, that breaks apart the electromagnetic spectrum to analyze what you can think of as like the chemical fingerprints of the different gases, the different molecules and things that it's seeing. So one of the cool things that ALICE is going to do is as New Horizons passes through the Pluto system, it's going to look back along the limb of Pluto, and it's going to wait until sunlight passes through the limb where we think there may be a tenuous atmosphere around Pluto. And as it does that, the spectrometer is going to look for the light passing through that atmosphere, and the atmosphere will imprint its fingerprints on that light so that Alice can actually see it. And so we'll get an understanding of the chemical composition of those gases. So we think probably that Pluto's atmosphere is going to be rich in nitrogen. We've made those observations from the ground, but maybe there are other things that perhaps hint at other processes, other chemicals, on the surface of Pluto. So that's going to be a very, very crucial instrument for really nailing down the composition of Pluto's atmosphere and perhaps even hints of its surface too.
And so sort of what seems to be the narrative of the day is that we don't really know a lot about this dwarf planet, that it's something that's been so far from us, so distant from our general conception. We haven't gotten any spacecrafts that have gotten anywhere near as close as New Horizons is getting. And so right now is simply an avalanche of discovery. We're seeing all these new things and we're trying to fit them like puzzle pieces into our conception of dwarf planetary formation and what all this means. And so as we go through these days, we discover a lot of new things, and we just have to now go into an investigational period. How can we all put this together? And so, as we're going into this exciting phase of getting so very close to this dwarf planet, there's a lot of exciting things to see. But is there any mystery in your mind that would be the best thing that could possibly come out of this investigational mission?
I think it's. I think I'd love to see an example of those active, geysers. Something cool and dynamic like that. I'd love also to see a hint of clouds. I mean, we don't know. The cameras are going to be looking out for clouds in the atmosphere, so maybe there's something like that. But I'd love to see a sense of this dynamic world. To be honest, I'm just looking forward to seeing those high resolution images when they come down on Wednesday. And just getting a glimpse of it, because as you said, it is like an avalanche of discovery, and we got to think of this in the wider context of our solar system. Our solar system, we talk about the planets, and really there are only a handful of planets. But out there in the Kuiper Belt, we think there may be 100,000 objects similar to Pluto, and so this is really the beginning. We've been waiting 9 years for this flyby. This though is really the beginning of exploring that whole region, and that to me is perhaps the most exciting thing about New Horizons, is that this is the start. We're here for the start, and anything we do now is just going to be real trailblazing.
That's right, and this is pretty much just the start of this series of New Horizons shows that we have. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of an outline of what we have in store for you over the next few days, and then we're actually going to go into some viewer questions. People are very curious about New Horizons, and so we're going to answer a couple of those. But yeah, first to start off, this is only part one of 3 of our New Horizons shows that are just on the horizon here. The second one is coming up tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 UTC, where we're going to be counting down to the official close approach of this spacecraft as it gets 7,800 miles away from the dwarf planet Pluto. And after that, the next day, we're going to have a follow-up with the first images coming out of this close approach. And that's going to be on this Wednesday, July 15th, 5:30 Eastern, 21:30 UTC. And so look forward to that as well. So lots more planned. This was just the beginning. But as we're getting to near sort of the end of this beginning, we do have a couple questions. There was one that came in through the Salute Clubhouse just a little while ago, where Jonathan was asking a little bit about the imagery that is coming out of this mission. We talked a little bit about it, but he was asking in particular, when will we have the color images from New Horizons of Pluto? And we're expecting that the day after the close approach. So we're looking forward to that, and we're actually going to have a show covering that. But then he follows up asking, what image format do these images come in exactly? Are they FITS files, and can we, as maybe amateur astronomers, can have access to these files? Can we tinker with them as the mission scientists might? Do we know if that's going to happen?
Yeah, so what's happening at the moment is we're getting JPEGs, compressed JPEGs uploaded to the New Horizons website, but the system will actually be, as Jonathan said, we will actually be getting those FITS files, those very high quality science data files, and the science team will be working on those images to do their science analyses. But what will happen is, in maybe months, up to a year's time, those FITS files will be released to the public so that you and I can go in and basically make the images ourselves, put the images together, and they get put onto something called the planetary data system. And so that will happen in a certain amount of time. I don't know what the exact period is for New Horizons data, but it's typically months to a year, so that the science team have a time to do their own science. But yeah, we will get those FITS files, and that's when we can have a go at making our own images. But for the time being, we've got these lovely JPEGs that are coming down that on an almost daily basis. And in fact, we know in the last couple of hours, in fact, we got a confirmation that another color image just before the flyby happens. In fact, the last one that will happen before the flyby, that has come down and it's on Earth, but we think we might get it. It might be released tomorrow. So, yeah, these images are coming in thick and fast, and it's keeping up with them on the website is quite a challenge.
Lots of goodies coming in all the time. And yeah, we're going to try and keep you updated on that as much as we can. We also have a question that came in on Twitter from Lady Herschel 2, who's asking, does Pluto have an atmosphere, or is it something that we hope to learn from the mission? And that's also something that I might expand that question a little bit to say, also, is this something we're thinking about in terms of the Pluto's moons, like Charon?
Well, as far as we know, Charon doesn't have an atmosphere, but that's up to this point. There could always be surprises. We don't know what we're going to find over the next couple of days. Pluto's atmosphere, yes, we think that Pluto does have an atmosphere. It's been detected. We can see it in ground-based, Earth-based studies have shown it, and that's what Alice is going to study in much more detail. Pluto's atmosphere, we think, actually is somewhat transitory. So what actually happens is that as Pluto comes close to the sun, the ices and the materials on the surface, we think, probably sublimate away, so sort of just drift out into space and create this sort of transitory atmosphere that's rich in nitrogen and perhaps a few other trace gases. But then as Pluto drifts away and goes farther away from the sun, it gets much colder, and then all these gases sort of condense and sort of fall back onto the surface of these frosts and these ices. So yeah, it has an atmosphere, but it's not like Earth's atmosphere, a thick atmosphere, or like any of the other planets in the solar system we think of having a fairly thick, dense atmosphere. It's a little bit more different than that.
So yeah, we know a little bit, and we're going to know a lot more after the
Yeah.
results that are coming in from these next couple of days. But yeah, this is sort of the final sort of regions of our first New Horizons show. But again, we have so much more coming up. You don't forget that we have a wonderful interview that we had just a couple days ago with John Spencer, who's part of the New Horizons science team that Will had a great time talking with that science team member, and we're going to be showing parts of that interview on the following show tomorrow morning, starting, don't forget, 7:30 a.m. Eastern, 11:30 UTC. But for now, we're just going to be ending our final time here, looking at the images coming up to the close approach, and now waiting with bated breath for those final hours when New Horizons is finally going to become face-to-face with Pluto. As we ramp up to these final, really pivotal moments, any last thoughts about this fantastic, fantastic mission, Will?
I think one of the things I always think on these flybys is that suddenly it makes it all very real, and especially in planetary science, when we see this world, it goes from this dot, how Clyde Tombaugh, basically took a picture of it in 1930 and discovered this little dot moving around against the background stars, to these images that we've been showing tonight, and what we're going to see in the coming few days. That really makes it very special. And I think this is a moment that we can all savor as astronomers, whether you're a member of the public, something really special. And think, I was there when this happened, and you'll remember this for many years to come.
This is science, this is celebration, and we're so happy that you're sharing this moment here with us at SLU. If you're a Clubhouse member, you might want to, if you really like Pluto, don't forget to check out the Pluto activity in the Clubhouse. It's a Discover Pluto activity, so you can trace the steps of our astronomy ancestors and see for yourself what it was like to discover that one dot amongst many that holds really a lot of significance in our solar system. But for now, this is the end of our first part series of the New Horizons show. And we're looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thanks again for staying tuned, and we'll be right back. This has been Will and Eric for SLU. See you tomorrow. That departed Earth in 2006. It was quite a long journey, and now we see it going through Pluto or through Jupiter, where it was day here. We're going to look on the 14th on the actual close approach of New Horizons to Pluto. It's going to be going so close, just 7,800 miles away. It's going to be incredible to see what sort of imagery comes out on that. And we're going to be going in for a third show on July 15th to show just what imagery is coming out. It's going to take a little while for those final images to be coming back to Earth from New Horizons. And so we're going to be going live in the evening of July 15th to go over just what those images happen to be for the close approach. But for now, let's take a look at all that's been going on with Pluto. And accompanying me here tonight is SLU astronomer Will Gator, and we're going to be looking at, here are some actual live images coming out of the Canary Islands, of the SLU scopes from the Canary Islands of Pluto. You see it as that red dot near the center of the screen right there. And it's actually, these are scopes that we love to use all the time. They're 8,000 feet above sea level. In summer, when it ended its journey of 2007 journey with a gravitational assist from this planet. And then after a little bit of time by Jupiter, studying Jupiter, its atmosphere, and what it has to offer, it went into hibernation mode for just a little bit, as it didn't pass any planets for quite a long while. This is as it ticked through 2007, 2008, all the way up to 2015, which is where we are right now, studying the distant dwarf planet Pluto and what it has to offer in all of its glory. This is our close approach to Pluto via New Horizons, and this is what we're covering tonight. Looking forward to this, the culmination of this journey that's going to happen tomorrow at 7:49 Eastern, 11:49 UTC. So stay tuned for that show as well. But yes, this is the first part in a three-part series where we're going to be talking tonight about all the different imagery that has been coming out of this mission over the past few months. It's been incredible to see what's developed with Pluto. And then on the second